Next question from Eric. How hard is it? How hard is it, or what's it like to get a manager to read your stuff?
It's tough. I wouldn't worry about getting a manager, especially in animation. You don't need a agent or a manager. Um, it can be helpful when you are getting when you're creating shows, especially and pitching. But really you don't need one because the animation community is so small. And what you'll find is a lot of Hollywood doesn't care about, especially kids animation, because it doesn't make them that much money in commissions.
Yeah.
So it's like
you're still getting your own jobs even if you have a manager. So
yeah, absolutely. I was with an agency, a big agency, for like 8 years, UTA, and I don't know if they brought me one job. So yeah, I think that it's more important actually to make friends in animation, and talk to people you admire, like maybe you admire us, I don't know, but like doing in these talks. But yeah, as far as getting your stuff read, that's also tough. I don't know if you agree, Madison, but it's like takes a lot of energy, to be totally honest, to read a script and give
I read 40
feedback.
I read 40 like 5 weeks ago. So yes,
oh God,
a lot of energy.
yeah, it's honestly not the same as like reviewing someone's storyboards or designs. I feel it's like it really takes a lot of time and concentration personally. So I think just making the connections and asking for advice, like letting people know that you're interested in getting into writing for animation, letting people know you're looking specifically for the writer's assistant job, or whatever
like
it is.
The writer's assistant position. It's a writer's assistant and script coordinator position in one in animation. And that is really a pipeline into writing. Our writer's assistant had 4 scripts this year. So
and I've seen that. I know it doesn't happen that way a lot of the time in live action, but of the shows I've been on in animation, I've seen that happen basically every time. So that's a great way in. The other thing I recommend is like making films. I mean, because you can't really, like, there's no such thing as like, look at my script. Isn't it great? Look.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's not how we digest writing really in the real world. So I think like if you can make your own short, even if it's really simple, if it gets across your writing sensibility and voice, like that's helpful, or comics or whatever. Yeah, but it is tough. I'd say like writing is for animation is a really niche, it's a hard
but job like
to get, but don't give up the fight.
And I would say like make connections, which I know sounds gross, so don't do it in a way of like, what can you do for me? And I'm only talking to you for that. But feel free to, like, if people's DMs are open, don't like go across the board and just DM people. But like, if you see somebody whose work you admire, follow them. Sometimes they follow you back. You can respectfully email or DM somebody, hey, I'm looking to get into animation writing. Normally I'd say, hey, can I take you out to coffee and ask you some questions? Now you might have to say, hey, do you mind, would you be open to having a quick Zoom call I'd love to pick your brain, stuff like that. I wanted to hire this writer on my show who unluckily, but luckily she got a different job. But she followed me. I followed her back. She DM'd me like, hey, I really love, your career. Just saying hi. I emailed her back and was like, hey, I see that you're working for a friend of mine. Send me your samples. And her samples were fantastic. And so, I put her forward for a bunch of jobs. So that's the best case scenario, but that's also how I found my mentee. I'm mentoring a writer from my college who I found on Twitter.
Next question we have from Penny. I have written a few children's books that are currently on Amazon. How hard is it to get into writing for animation?
You'll be in a similar position to anyone else just starting to write for animation. Like, there's not a clear bridge between writing books and writing scripts. It's going to be a learning process. But I would say try to get a hold of some scripts, live action animation, and see what they're doing and the language of screenwriting, because there's definitely like a language you have to learn. And that comes by looking at other scripts and also finding just what works for you. But I'd say like the first thing that I had to learn for screenwriting was just formatting. If I'm reading scripts and I'm reading a script that looks really weird, like
written in Word,
it's not formatted properly.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an immediate goes in the trash. I'm not even reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it tells me that they're not ready to be on a show. Madison, you seem more generous than me, because like there are a lot of people I would consider with no experience for a writer's assistant, but they'd have to like blow me out of the water. If
to be fair, she's already writing on another show.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, I like to see, unless they're really great and they've had some kind of training, they've been a writer's assistant or something, like to see a little experience usually. So I'm saying, like, even to be considered for a writer's assistant, which if I were a showrunner, in my mind, it's like, I would like this to be a person I could see writing on the show. So I'd still want to see that they can do basic like script formatting and use Final Draft or Highland or whatever, preferably Final Draft though.
The next question is also kind of this is very similar from Eric. Is just he's asking how competitive is it to land a job in the animation industry in writing? Do you have any writing exercises that you recommend?
No writing exercises, but it is competitive. It's a small pond.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's not to say that like new voices aren't welcome. It's just, it's an industry about who you know. So it's competitive in that way. Also our rooms where live action comedies can be 16 people. Animation is, the average I've seen is
3.
around 4.
Yeah.
So
our show on Big Nate, I'm the head writer, and then we have 2 other staff writers, and then a script coordinator. So it's pretty small.
Yeah.
So
very competitive.
And then it's not only competitive, but then like if I were to be staffing a show, I'd also want to be representing as many different types of people as possible, honestly. So I'm also thinking about diversity and all of that. So it's like, yeah, it's tough.
I do recommend people work in production first. Even if you're a PA or a production secretary, it's really important to understand the pipeline, the animation pipeline of like, okay, so what I write affects the board artists and the designers for the backgrounds and the props and the characters, and it affects layout, and here's how it affects animation, and here, so
any job you can get in animation. Yeah.
And I think understanding how like you can't write a crowd scene in every episode because you're literally killing everyone down the line.
Yeah.
How your job fits into the larger picture is important. So I would say take a production job, and then you have access to the writers. You can ask them to lunch. You can ask to say, hey, I want to write. Can I just ask you some questions? Can we go to lunch, or can we have a call?
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. And now that I think about it, like that was your path, Madison, but it was also one of the staff writers on our show started as a PA. Our script coordinator was a PA on our last job, or production coordinator, can't remember. But that's another great way just to get your foot in the door. And I definitely feel a lot more comfortable when people reach out to me within the studio that I'm in. Like there's like a level of like you feel also like an obligation to
Investment,
investment. I said obligation, but
tomato, really.
yeah.